TYT has a new sponsor, Netflix. That's fantastic for our show. That's fantastic for you guys. You know why? You get a free trial membership. Netflix.com/TYT, and you get a month free. What sick? That's a good deal. Listen to what Colorado Democrat Michael Bennet said on the floor of the Senate just a short time ago. He's just off camera here, as you'll see, but he didn't realize that the mic was still on. Let's listen.
It's all rigged. I mean, the whole conversation is rigged. The fact that we don't get to a discussion before the break about what we're going to do in the lame duck is just rigged. But if it is rigged, who's rigging it and who's in favor? Which side does it come out in favor of? Those are good questions. Let's see if we can answer some of those questions. Ari Berman writes for The Nation and is the author of Herding Donkeys, the fight to rebuild the Democratic Party and reshape American politics. Robert Traynham is the Washington, D.C. bureau chief for the Comcast network. He's the former communications director for Senator Rick Santorum and served as communications advisor for the Bush-Cheney 04 campaign. All right, Ari, any chance that the Democrats win on anything? And I mean, if they get unemployment benefits, is that a win for them, for the country?
No, and I think you're justifiably cynical about this because Republicans say they want to compromise, but they're not compromising. Democrats just seem like they're willing to give more and more and more, and so they're basically willing to trade away $700 billion, extend all those tax cuts for the wealthy, and then get unemployment benefits extended for a few months. I mean, that doesn't seem to me like a very good deal.
So, Robert, talk to me about that. If the Republicans' stance after the 2008 elections was no compromise, and their stance after the 2010 elections is no compromise, hey, maybe that's a winning political strategy, but can you see how some Americans would be frustrated with that?
I can see that, but also remember that Republicans won big a couple of weeks ago. They too have a mandate. Now, recognizing that they're not in control of the executive branch, but they're listening to their constituency. And their constituency spoke loud and clear, and it's not just the Tea Party. It's moderate Democrats, it's middle-of-the-road independents that are saying, wait a minute, government is too big. Wait a minute, you know what, I'm not wealthy, and I don't want my taxes to go up. And, and thirdly, I have some really strong reservations about health care reform. So the Republicans, it's really interesting here because the Democrats are in their corner saying, I'm listening to our constituency, and the Republicans are saying the same exact thing. The real question is whether or not, quite frankly, if the Republican leadership and the Democratic leadership are willing to come to the table and literally roll up their sleeves and says, I'm going to give something, you're going to have to give something, and we're going to have to go back to our constituency, and we're going to have to explain this because, in other words, both of our butts are on the line here.
Ari, is that true, though? Are the Democrats listening to their constituency?
No, of course not. I mean, they're not listening to you. They're not listening to me, certainly. I mean, basically what's happening is if there was a compromise, we'd say, okay, maybe we'll bump the upper income to $500,000. Maybe we'll bump it up to $1 million, and then we'll deal with it. That would be an actual compromise, right? Just saying we'll extend it for a few years, we'll extend all the tax cuts, and we'll extend the upper income tax cuts for a few years is not a compromise. That's basically just giving Republicans everything they want.
But Ari, what makes you think that the Republicans are not going to do something like that behind closed doors? What makes you think that they're not going to say, you know what, maybe 250 is too low, maybe we should bump up the minimum threshold to 500,000 or maybe $1 million? What makes you think they won't do that?
I've seen no indication, but maybe you know something that we don't know.
Right. Now, Robert, look, I know you've said that on air before, and that's an interesting compromise, and I hope that they, at least they're beginning to have those discussions. But in the past, part of the reason they don't do it is because they know they could push the Democrats around. I mean, do you know the Democrats will fold? I mean, come on, Robert, think about it, right? If they extend the tax cuts for the rich for another 2 years, what happens in 2 years? We have another election. And if a Republican wins, they're going to get extended forever, aren't they, Robert?
Well, okay, first of all, I take issue with your question. I mean, first and foremost, just because you make $250,000 or more on paper does not make you wealthy. Let's take, for example,
yes,
a farmer.
It does.
No, it doesn't. Let's take, for example.
Absolutely does.
It does not, and I'll tell you why. Let's take, for example, a farmer in Midwestern Pennsylvania who may have $1 million worth of equipment in his or her farm, but thus in the process only makes $250,000, but because they, in fact, have employees, but in fact, because they have actual, and this is a true story, by the way, and because they have employees and because they have overhead, they actually only make $75,000 when they make all of their entire payments outside. Those are real Americans out there.
Robert,
with all due respect, those are real Americans out there that on paper may make $250,000 a year, but are not wealthy.
Robert, I'm positive they're real Americans. I don't think they're fake Americans. And I love you, but I got to 100% disagree with that example. The proposal is for income taxes above $250,000. If your example, their income tax is at $75,000, they're going to get Obama's tax cut anyway. So no, we're talking about income tax. We're not talking about their equipment. We're not talking about their corporations. And in fact, with these big CEOs, they say, oh, I'll create more jobs if you give me more tax cuts. But we're not even talking about their corporations. If, for example, Rupert Murdoch runs Fox News Corp, right? He gets to take home with the Bush tax cuts, if he gets them, $1.3 million. But that doesn't go into News Corp so they could hire more people to work on The Simpsons or on Fox News Channel. He takes it home. That's what we're talking about.
You're exactly right. Now, another part of that argument is, look, the person that makes $1.3 million, they're going to go out and they're going to make an expansion of their house. They're going to hire more staff to help clean that house. They're going to well, no, I mean, this is a legitimate argument. So thus in the process, they have more money to pump back into the economy, which thus in the process creates more jobs. I mean, it's a government law of physics. If in fact there's more money in people's pockets, they're going to spend more, which thus in the process means that's going to fuel the economy.
The Congressional Budget Office says it is the worst multiplier effect to stimulate the economy. And by the way, I don't think that there's a problem with the butler and maid employment in this country. I mean, if that's the Republican strategy, that's a disaster. But look, Robert, I got to throw a question at Ari here. There's a new CNBC AP poll, and it shows something interesting. It shows that 54% say that changes made to close the deficit should be evenly distributed among all Americans. 38% say the changes should be targeted to impact the wealthy, and only 6% say the changes should focus on low-income citizens. But Ari, we have the Deficit Commission basically saying, hey, you know what? Let's, in a sense, tax the low-income people, right?
Yeah, of course.
Because by making them work longer and not giving them payments for an extra 2 years, et cetera, right?
Well,
aren't they doing the exact opposite of what the American people want?
Well, absolutely. And Robert was talking about the tax cuts earlier. I mean, the American public has shown over and over in every poll, despite the arguments made, that they want these tax cuts for the rich not to be extended. So I don't think they have the upper ground on that one. In terms of, the broader thing, it's just, the economy is not working for everyone. It's not being distributed fairly. And basically, I mean, if the rich make a lot more money, they're not just going to invest it. They're going to take it offshore. They're going to use it in hedge funds. They're going to pay less taxes on it. So I think this whole trickle-down economics thing, we have to be careful of that sort of argument.
Robert, let me give you the last word.
I have to say this. We are, in fact, having a disingenuous argument. And the reason why is because there's another poll out there that you failed to mention that says that 56% of Americans also want government to shrink, that they're willing to perhaps have less government if, in fact, it means that their taxes do not go up. So let's make sure that we have a fair argument out there and that the American people that are watching this great network and watching this program understand the context of the whole entire conversation.
Robert, good point. By the way, just let me say at the end, it's actually 59%. It's 59 to 30 saying we should deal with this in terms of cutting spending rather than doing taxes. But when you talk about taxes, as you saw in that poll, and it's the same poll, by the way, they say, please tax the wealthy, don't tax me. And that seems to make a lot of sense. So I'm going to leave it right there, but it's been a great conversation.
That means they're going to tax you because you're the one who makes all the money on MSNBC.
Oh, is that right? I hope that's true. I'll gladly pay the taxes. All right, Ari Berman and Robert Traynham, thank you so much, guys.